nothing truly began in 1939. When gunfire finally echoed across Europe, the world was already cracked, angry, and exhausted. World War II did not suddenly appear. It was the final eruption of pressures that had been building quietly for years. The war exploded in 1939, but it was conceived long before that, shaped by decisions made in silence and mistakes the world refused to correct. The end of World War I was supposed to mark a new era. Instead, it planted the seeds of another catastrophe. The Treaty of Versailles wasn't about rebuilding Europe. It was about punishment. Germany was blamed, humiliated, and financially crushed. Land was taken away, military power stripped, and impossible debts imposed. To the outside world, it looked like justice. To the German population, it felt like collective humiliation. An entire generation grew up believing their country had been unfairly destroyed and deliberately weakened. Across Europe, leaders tried to sell the image of recovery. Cities buzzed again. Culture returned. Economies appeared to stabilize. But beneath the surface, resentment simmered. The global economy was fragile. And when the Great Depression hit in 1929, it shattered what little balance remained. Banks collapsed overnight, jobs vanished. Families lost homes and dignity. Fear became a daily reality, and fear always looks for someone to blame. That environment became the perfect breeding ground for extremism. Radical ideas didn't appear out of nowhere. They grew from desperation, anger, and hopelessness. In Germany, the message was simple and effective. The nation had been betrayed. Enemies were everywhere, and strength was the only solution. Adolf Hitler didn't invent that narrative. He exploited it. He offered certainty in a chaotic world, pride to a humiliated population, and someone to point at when everything went wrong. The rest of the world saw what was happening, but chose comfort over confrontation. The trauma of World War I still haunted Europe. Leaders were desperate to avoid another bloodbath. This gave rise to appeasement, the belief that giving aggressive regimes what they wanted would prevent a larger conflict. It was a dangerous illusion. When Germany remilitarized the Rhineland, nothing happened. When Austria was absorbed, the response was muted. When Czechoslovakia was carved up at the negotiating table, it was framed as a necessary compromise. Each concession sent the same message: there would be no real consequences. Germany was not alone in its ambitions. In Italy, Mussolini demonstrated that fascism could seize power and thrive. In the Soviet Union, Stalin ruled through fear, purges, and absolute control. In Japan, militarism grew as the country sought resources and dominance in Asia. Across the globe, regimes were rising that believed force was not only justified, but essential. War was no longer unthinkable. It was becoming normalized. The League of Nations, created to prevent exactly this kind of escalation, proved incapable of action. It issued warnings, resolutions, and condemnations, but no enforcement. When Japan invaded Manchuria, nothing stopped it. When Italy attacked Ethiopia, sanctions failed. When Germany violated treaties, negotiations replaced consequences. Aggression became cheap, and cheap aggression spreads fast. Spain became the testing ground. The Spanish Civil War wasn't just a national tragedy. It was a rehearsal for global conflict. German aircraft tested bombing strategies on civilians. Italian forces backed authoritarian allies. Ideologies clashed openly while the rest of Europe watched from a distance. Cities like Guernica were destroyed, proving that modern warfare would not spare civilians. The warning signs were unmistakable. Meanwhile, the United States remained focused inward. The Great Depression had shaken the country deeply. Isolationism dominated public opinion. Americans wanted nothing to do with European conflicts. The Atlantic Ocean felt like a shield, but the world was already too interconnected for distance to offer real protection. Throughout the 1930s, the signs multiplied. Military parades grew larger. Speeches grew more aggressive. Borders were crossed without resistance. Each event alone seemed manageable. Together, they formed a clear pattern. Governments kept hoping time would solve the problem. They believed aggressive leaders would stop once satisfied, They believed fear of war would prevent war itself. Those assumptions proved fatal. When Germany signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, it shocked the world. Two ideological enemies aligned not out of trust, but convenience. It was a strategic move, not a peaceful one. Poland's fate was sealed. When German forces invaded in September 1939, the world reacted as if something unexpected had happened. In reality, it was the logical outcome of years of inaction. World War II did not start with bombs or tanks. It started with words, with economic collapse, with unresolved trauma, and with leaders choosing delay over responsibility. It began when injustice was tolerated for the sake of temporary stability, when warning signs were ignored because confronting them felt too risky. The destruction that followed was immense. Entire cities erased, millions killed, families destroyed. But the true beginning of that tragedy lies in the years between the wars. When the world had opportunities to change course and chose denial instead, the war was not sudden. It was carefully assembled through silence, compromise, and fear. Understanding that World War II began long before 1939 matters because history repeats its patterns. Global conflicts don't announce themselves. They grow quietly, fueled by resentment, economic pain, and unchecked ambition. They thrive when the world convinces itself that problems elsewhere are not its concern. History rarely starts with explosions. It begins with whispers, ignored warnings, and uncomfortable truths no one wants to face. And when those whispers finally turn into screams, the damage is already done.